Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week. And before I jump into this episode, I do want to state that next week I won't have an episode. I just won't be able to fit it in. But if you want my thoughts on the comics that come out that week, I'll probably post something on Twitter. But definitely I'll be on Comic Book Weekly, our podcast show that we do every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, which is live and also gets posted post live. So if you want my thoughts on those comics, that is the best place to go. But then after that week, I'll be on my regular schedule for my reviews. So I just want to give that little tidbit. Now, jumping into the review, I have 10 comics this week. So it's a pretty average size haul. So moving into number 10 for me, and that was The Amazing Spider-Man issue 69. Back to the bottom of the list, sadly. We do have news that Nick Spencer is leaving the book, so curious to see how he's going to wrap everything up. But this issue is, a lot of the problems I've been having with this book. There's 3 different artists in this issue. That's definitely been a thing for The Amazing Spider-Man, especially that this is a weekly arc. And I'd rather just have Amazing Spider-Man on a monthly basis if it means it's going to be one artist, quality writing, and I feel like that's what makes Spider-Man suffer a lot is that even though this arc is weekly, usually it is bi-monthly at the very least, or the very most, I would say, and that's a lot of comics, and you could definitely see the quality kind of dip down because of it. And this issue, nothing really happens, in my opinion. I didn't really quite enjoy his lab partner story. But also, I would also say, even if the plot doesn't move, there's a lot that they try to squeeze in, which is why the plot doesn't move very well. I think it opens up with Teresa and her parents' killer and is like, oh, I have a secret, of what this is all about. And then it ends on the same note without really any answers. So, that's kind of the big moving plot for the Chameleon Conspiracy, I believe it's called. Yeah, Conspiracy. And that's, Chameleon's hardly part of the story. And then he was like, that's okay. I want to see Peter anyways. And that one just doesn't move very well. I wasn't very interested in the plot. And all it is teases for the Sinister War, and I was just disappointed with this one. Again, the artist change was very noticeable as well, so it just kind of felt a little rushed, this issue. So I'm giving that 2 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Silk, issue 4, another spider book, which I am disappointed at. And this is a mini-series, I believe. It's supposed to be an ongoing. And the reason this one's so low is because it was an exposition dump. The whole issue is just explaining who this villain is. And you hardly see Silk in this issue. She's just listening to the story, and it just I didn't feel like it was utilizing the medium to its fullest. And I already didn't quite love the villain. So to have this whole explainy story of like, oh, this is why she's doing the things she's doing, it didn't really make me invested in her story or Cindy's story here. And I've been kind of disappointed with this arc because I really like this character a lot, but I just feel like there could be more that's being done, especially because this is a mini and not an ongoing. It's not a first arc. It's a beginning, middle, and end. And I really don't feel like the pages are being as utilized strongly as they could be. The reason this is higher than Spider-Man, though, is that the artwork is pretty consistent for the book, and I do kind of like the YA feel to the visuals. So overall, giving that 2 stars, and that is number 9. Moving on to number 8. I'm a little disappointed to see this so low, but that is Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, issue 71. And I believe it's Power Rangers issue 8. So they kind of have 2 different titles / numbering, legacy numbering, depending on what cover you get. But this issue, it's very action heavy. And, I'm not a huge sci-fi fan. So it was a very sci-fi heavy issue. So for me, personally, I couldn't get into it as much, but there are some interesting character beats here, especially in the beginning and in the closing of this issue, where we get to see Lord Draken, kind of relate some of his feelings about building an empire to some of the other Omega Rangers, especially Zack, and seeing Zack's morality kind of put on the stand here by the end of the issue. But the big chunk of that middle was the action sci-fi stuff that, again, I'm just not as invested in, and the newer characters I'm not as invested in. But I did like the cliffhanger with, Zordon's people in the end. So that, I'm interested to see how that comes full circle, especially with how it relates to the other Power Rangers title. So overall, I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. Artwork is pretty solid, but like I said, it just more wasn't my personal vibe of the type of storytelling. So that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Captain Marvel issue 29. So, this, I feel like it's been a while since we had issue 28. I think this book was delayed for a little while, and I've enjoyed this arc for the most part. I enjoy the idea that Captain Marvel wants to learn magic and no one wants to teach her, and then she goes to her enemy, at least in this arc, which is Enchantress, where she's like, okay, I'll teach you how to do magic, and kind of screws with her by the end of the issue. I do think the pacing could have been a little stronger here, and I do think previous issues were better for the character work, especially, again, some of the humor for the last issue. But overall, it was an okay issue for me. I do think there's forgettable parts and things that we've kind of already seen with Captain Marvel, like the end, the cliffhangers, she gets lava and she powers up, and we definitely seen that cliffhanger before in this particular volume of Captain Marvel, where something happens, she powers up and becomes stronger. So I just felt like this one was kind of going through the motions a little bit more than some of the previous issues, where I feel like the humor was a little stronger and the character work, where this was more point A, point B, even though I enjoyed the references to the previous arc and how that's affecting Captain Marvel personally and why she's digging into this magic. It's just the adventure part I thought could have been a little stronger. So I'm giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 7. And also the artwork is pretty solid. I think some of the facial expressions could be a bit stronger though. So moving on to number 6, I'm disappointed to see this a little lower, and that is Detective Comics issue 1038. So this issue also doesn't really move the plot that much. It's point A, point B, where we just learn that the Mr. Worth, or Mayor Worth, I think his name is Mr. Worth, he's a bad guy. He's upset that his daughter, died and wants to get revenge. And this is kind of connecting to the Peacemakers and what's going on in the government of Gotham, which is definitely, out of all the Batman story arcs, the least interesting thing to me, which is, again, the Peacemakers or Peacekeepers, whatever their name is. And I have not been invested, and I didn't really love Future State. So to see that this story is leaning so much towards that instead of the character work that has been so solid for this book, like Lady Clayface and everything that's been going on with Bruce moving into his new new section of the city and actually interacting with people. So I just thought this was going through the motions, in my opinion. Even the Huntress and Batman's interaction. But then I did like the backup story with Penguin. I thought the artwork was stronger there too, and that was a big complaint of why this is a little lower, is that the artwork was not Dan Mora this week, and it just didn't feel fully rendered. There's parts that felt blurry. It kind of had this Greg Capullo feel, but a little bit muddier, and it just didn't work for me here. And I do usually like Capullo's artwork, and obviously it's not Capullo, but it kind of had a similar style to me, and yeah, the pages just felt a little blurry to me, a little bit too muddy. So overall, giving that one 2.5 stars. Was disappointed with this issue, honestly, but I'm hoping you'll pick up with the next one, because I've been overall enjoying this arc, and I hope this is just a little bit of a misstep. So that's number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Marvel Voices Pride. I did get the Karolina and Nico cover as well, but I used this one to read, so I don't have the Nico Karolina cover with me, but I did buy it, and I love that cover. And definitely cover of the week for me. And very excited for this issue. I thought the DC Pride issue, the one shot, was okay. It didn't blow my mind as much as I wanted it to. And I might do a video comparing the two Pride books. I still haven't decided. Let me know if you guys want to see that or not. But with this issue, and I'm going to compare it a little bit. I felt like there were stories that were just too short. Like Karolina and Nico got like 2 or 3 pages here. Like every single time I was starting to get into a story, it's like, oh, it's over already. And some stories were really, really long. And I'm like, oh my God, this is long. I kind of wish, and what I think DC did a little bit better is that they all the stories they had kind of were the same number of pages. But, the character, I really enjoyed the characters here. Like, again, the Karolina and Nico date was so cute, and I love seeing Krisenka's artwork, and I just really adored that story. I thought the opener with the timeline of queer characters in Marvel was really interesting. And then I think one thing I really enjoyed about this is how it tackled different sides of the LGBTQ community. We had transgendered characters. We also had bisexual characters. And I really appreciated the Prodigy story. I'm bisexual myself. So to see, a character express his bisexuality and really talk about the journey of being bisexual and how that's different from other queer identities, I thought was really good, and I enjoyed that as well. But then there were some filler stories in here as well where I just felt like they were just kind of going with the motions, and I wasn't as attached to them. Some surprise stories, probably Black Cat. I really liked Black Cats because I didn't know she was bi. So I was like, oh, that was really cool. And then I looked it up because I haven't been reading Black Cat. And I guess it was revealed in her ongoing series. So I thought that was interesting. I'm trying to think if there was any other stories that really piqued my interest and surprised me. Those are probably the big ones. There's a new character introduced from the X-Men. We'll see where that ends up going. And I'm guessing this is going to be a little bit more of a spectator book because of it. But yeah, that's kind of my overall thoughts on this issue. Again, some were stronger than others. I guess my big thought is that there's characters that I feel like there's the beginning of this issue where they're like, oh, we've lived with queer coding stories, and hopefully like we're moving from that. But then at the same time, you don't reference Kitty Pryde, you don't reference Star-Lord, and these are some big name characters. I feel like that would be such a big deal to have in your Pride book. So that's a little disappointing, especially because Kitty is kind of referenced in this issue, and she's, they pretty much confirm that she's a bisexual character. She's such a big character, and I think that would be really important. Same thing for Star-Lord, who's been confirmed this year as well. So, I don't think this was a perfect issue, and I do think it was rather long. I think it could have been paced a little differently, but obviously it's an important issue. I'm very happy it's being made, and I hope we get to see this every year, to see these anthologies grow even more and to see more stories from queer characters. So I'm giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Robin issue 3. I really enjoy this book. Every issue just surprises the hell out of me, and I shouldn't be surprised because I've loved this book since issue 1. Yes, it's only been 3 issues, but I also really like Williamson's writing. And this whole issue is about Robin learning to have fun. And, going to this party is probably not his speed, and he kind of walks away from the party a little bit. And he joins up with Connor Hawke, which is such an interesting interaction. And you see they're kind of building a real friendship. And the line of Damian talking about his friendship with the Teen Titans and why that didn't work, and his friendship with John and why that's kind of strained right now. And then you get to see this genuine connection between him and Connor, and then they end up fighting in the end, and Damian continues to lose because he still thinks he's smarter than everybody else. But he's also dealing with a lot of baggage with Alfred's death, and again, losing a lot of his friends, losing, I guess, his family in some regard too. So really interesting character issue where you really just pick up on some interesting themes of Damian, which is the idea that he doesn't know how to have fun, while also giving us a little bit from the other characters as well, like Flatline. Again, Ravager and Connor Hawke have a big part in this too. Artwork is so good for this too. I really enjoy the style. It kind of has a bit of a cartoonier style, which works for all the manga references made here. But yeah, overall, really solid book, and a good cliffhanger with Ra's al Ghul showing up in the end. Man, where is that gonna go? What is up with that character, and where has he been? And I just love the building of just so many different facets of Damian's side of the DC universe in these issues, and how much is being able to be fit in these issues as well. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Fantastic Four Life Story issue 2. I didn't love the first issue. I wasn't able to get into that issue as much, but I really enjoyed this issue. Whereas in the point of view of Sue Storm, and she, her feeling invisible, and it really tackled the 70s in an interesting way, and tackled feminism in a really interesting way, and how in this universe, which I think even in the regular universe, one misstep with Reed and Sue's relationship, who knows where that would end up going, but they do work at their relationship and love each other, and I think that's the big difference with the regular universe to this universe, where Reed doesn't try. He's so obsessed with his work, he never really looks at Sue and kind of sees her as invisible, and the way she builds and wants to grow as a person, I thought was super interesting, and again, how that tackles women's rights in the 70s, and it just politically it was a really interesting issue, but still character-wise was super interesting as well, while still like building this bigger world of Galactus is coming, Dr. Doom kind of putting himself in the story as well. I thought the narration was so beautiful, and I'm looking forward to seeing where these characters go. You really don't know where it's going to go with these type of stories. I mean, we saw that with Spider-Man. There's so many twists and turns with that book, and I'm excited to see the same thing done with Fantastic Four. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Shadecraft, issue 4. And man, oh man, what a book. I love this book so much. We're up to issue 4, and the way this book moves, so much has happened and told in such a beautiful way. So in this issue, again, last issue, we just had the reveal that the brother might not be real. This might not be the brother. And we get to see at the same time the brother's being moved to a nursing home with the parents kind of finally making that decision and saying, okay, I think we have to move on. And Sadie is upset about that. She's like, I miss my brother. Because obviously she's still dealing with that the shadow might not be her brother, this connection she was making. And then, the story blows up even more, where we find out the mother is part of all this and knows about the shades or the shadows, and is going to work together with her daughter to find her brother, who probably is her brother, who's a shade. The FBI is involved. And the mom used to work for the FBI. And the way the story unravels is just so good. It moves so well, this book. The artwork is so solid from an emotional standpoint. There's some really emotional beats here, especially with Sadie just dealing with the loss of her brother and really how the family has somewhat broken because of it, and then them coming together with the truth of these shadows. Just such a wonderful issue. You don't know who to trust. You really don't know what the next issue is going to bring. And what a pleasant read this book is. So overall, giving that 4.5 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to my pick of the week, which is Infinite Frontier issue 1. Oh my God. Speaking of Williamson, he blew my mind in this issue. There's so much that happens. And, it's still so well balanced. I think that's a hardship with some books. We're just talking about SpiderMan, where we have a book where a lot is happening, but also not a lot is moving. And it really, how do you share the space in the such limited space you have in comics? And Infinite Frontier does a beautiful job at every beat. A lot of things are happening, but you don't feel like it's being thrown at you. And that's probably also because the artwork doesn't feel too claustrophobic, feels very cinematic, the artwork, and just bleeds really well with the writing. But with this issue, we get to see Alan Scott team up with his children and dealing with the whole world knowing about the multiverse and teams being formed because of it. You get to see Flashpoint, Batman, you get to see Mary Marvel, you get to see that rabbit character from the Grant Morrison stuff. So you get to see that these worlds are colliding and how that's affecting the DC universe, but also just regular people. But then you have the shock of Jade is missing. Is she dead? What's going on? The family just got together. What's going on there? And then you have some other stories with Barry also still dealing with the aftermath of the multiverse, and he ends up meeting up with Psycho Pirate, which you always know if Psycho Pirate's involved, some multiverse things are going to happen. But then some parts of the issue slow down a bit too, where we get to see Chase and Graves kind of have a discussion as well, or Bones, not Graves. Bones have a discussion just about where the world's at and the world knowing about the multiverse. So you kind of get those character moments as well. Then another big moment is the end of the issue where we get to see Roy Harper is, just listening to the crowd, listening to see how they're dealing with these multiverse stuff. And then he's a Black Lantern and you're like, what is going on? And people are, searching for him and saying you should be dead. There's so much that happens in this and so much to digest, but it doesn't feel like things are being thrown at you. It just felt very organic and it felt like a first 15 minutes of a television show, and we got a lot happen. There's a murder mystery in this issue as well with Barry Allen, some new teams being formed. There's a lot of great information that definitely will have impacts to the larger DC universe, which is always a nice feeling when you're reading a comic where you're like, oh man, how's this gonna affect the continuity? It feels so much bigger than one comic, and I love books like that where it actually does affect things. And Death Metal really promised that, and now we're getting the follow through with Infinite Frontier, which will hopefully affect other titles as well and affect the bigger DC universe. But man, what a wonderful issue. I am stoked to read issue 2. That was a really good entry. So, of course, in the comments below, let me know what your pick of the week was, because at the end of the episodes, so in 2 weeks, I will announce the viewer pick of the week. And this week's viewer pick of the week is Radiant Black, my pick of the week from last week as well. And here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Definitely follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Go check out my comics like Father Like Daughter and They Call Her a Dancer. And every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time is Comic Book Weekly, where we discuss our favorite comics and comic book news. Thanks, guys. Bye.